The text message flashed on her screen at 6:47 p.m. Don't marry him. He'll destroy you. Victoria's hands trembled as she stared at the warning, but the church bells were already ringing, and her father was reaching for her arm to walk her down the aisle. Victoria Chen stood before the ornate mirror in the bridal suite, her reflection a portrait of ethereal beauty and hidden turmoil. The late afternoon sun streaming through the stained glass windows cast rainbow patterns across her ivory gown, but something in her amber eyes betrayed a shadow of doubt she couldn't quite shake. What do you think was going through Victoria's mind in those final moments before the warning arrived? Share your thoughts below. You look absolutely breathtaking, sweetheart, her mother whispered, adjusting the delicate lace veil. Alexander won't know what hit him. Victoria forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach that had been growing tighter with each passing hour. 6 months. That's all it had taken for Alexander Pierce to sweep into her life, dazzle her family with his charm and wealth, and put this massive diamond on her finger. It felt like a fairy tale, almost too perfect. Her best friend Rachel had called it a whirlwind romance. Her sister had called it impulsive. But when you're 32 and you meet a successful, handsome man who looks at you like you're the answer to every prayer he's ever whispered, you don't question it. You don't want to. Across town, in a dimly lit apartment, James Morrison's fingers hovered over his keyboard, his heart racing. The former detective had spent the last 3 sleepless nights piecing together the puzzle, following the trail of breadcrumbs that led to Alexander Pierce's true identity. The coffee cups scattered across his desk told the story of his obsession, each one a marker of time running out. Come on, he muttered, scrolling through years of police reports, missing persons cases, and newspaper clippings. 3 women. 3 different states. 3 marriages that had ended in mysterious circumstances. The faces on his screen haunted him, beautiful, successful women who had fallen for the same charming smile, the same practice lines, the same carefully crafted persona. And now Victoria Chen was about to become number 4. James ran his fingers through his disheveled hair, glancing at the clock. The wedding was scheduled for 7 p.m. at St. Michael's Cathedral. He had less than an hour to prevent another tragedy, to stop another woman from falling into the elaborate trap he'd spent months investigating. Back at the church, Victoria's bridesmaids fluttered around her like butterflies in their burgundy dresses, touching up makeup, adjusting flowers, filling the air with excited chatter. But Victoria's mind kept drifting to the strange incidents of the past week. The way Alexander had snapped at the florist when she'd made a minor mistake, the cold gleam in his eyes when she'd mentioned postponing the wedding by a month, the mysterious phone call she'd overheard in his study. It's just wedding jitters, she whispered to herself, smoothing down her dress for the 100th time. Everyone gets nervous before their wedding day. Her father appeared in the doorway, distinguished in his tuxedo, his silver hair catching the light. Princess, it's almost time. His eyes misted over as he took in the sight of his daughter. You know, it's not too late if you're having second thoughts. No matter what, I'm on your side. Victoria's throat tightened. For a moment, she wanted to tell him everything, about the nightmares, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right, the way Alexander sometimes looked at her like she was a prize he'd won rather than a person he loved. But then she thought of the 300 guests waiting downstairs, the expensive flowers, the 5-tier cake, the honeymoon tickets to Bali. She thought of Alexander's mother's proud smile, of the way her own mother had bragged to all her friends about her daughter marrying one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. I'm fine, Dad, she said, taking his arm. Just nervous excitement. As they prepared to leave the bridal suite, Victoria's phone buzzed in her clutch bag. She almost didn't check it. It was time to head downstairs, after all. But something made her reach for it, some instinct she couldn't explain. The message appeared on her screen at 6:47 p.m., from an unknown number. Don't marry him. He'll destroy you. Her heart stopped. The church bells began to ring, their joyful pealing now sounding more like a warning. Her father squeezed her arm gently, oblivious to the way her world had just tilted on its axis. Ready, sweetheart. Victoria stared at the message, her carefully applied lipstick suddenly feeling like a mask, the veil like a cage. In the distance, the wedding march began to play. The walk down the aisle felt like moving through water. Each step was simultaneously too fast and too slow, the faces of guests blurring together as Victoria's mind raced. The warning message seemed to pulse in her clutch bag, burning against her side like a hot coal. Alexander stood at the altar, devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo. His smile was perfect, practiced. Victoria's mind whispered traitorously. As she drew closer, she caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Possession? Triumph? It vanished so quickly she couldn't be sure. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, his voice echoing through the cathedral's vast space. "We are gathered here today." Victoria's attention drifted to the massive wooden doors at the back of the church. They remained closed, but she found herself willing them to burst open, for someone to rush in and stop this. To explain the message. To give her a reason to trust her instincts. Alexander took her hands in his. They were cold. "Before we proceed with the vows," the priest continued, "if anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The traditional pause felt endless. Victoria's heart thundered in her chest. Silence. Then, the sharp crack of the church doors flying open. "Stop!" Every head turned. A man Victoria had never seen before stood in the doorway, disheveled and breathing hard. His tie was loose, his jacket rumpled, and he clutched a manila folder in his hands. "Victoria Chen," he called out, his voice carrying through the shocked silence. "My name is James Morrison. I'm a former detective, and that man you're about to marry is not who you think he is." Alexander's grip on Victoria's hands tightened painfully. "Security," he barked, his charming smile replaced by something darker. "Remove this man immediately." But James was already striding down the aisle, pulling photographs from his folder. His real name isn't Alexander Pierce. 3 years ago, he was Michael Stevens in Seattle. Before that, Christopher Walsh in Chicago. And his first victim? He was Richard Thompson when he married her. The word victim hit Victoria like a physical blow. She tried to pull her hands away, but Alexander held fast. "This is ridiculous," Alexander laughed, but there was an edge to it now. "Victoria, darling, this man is clearly disturbed." "Security." 2 ushers moved toward James, but he kept talking, his words tumbling out urgently. 3 marriages, 3 wealthy women. Each one disappeared within a year. Their money vanished with them. He looked directly at Victoria. "The text message you received? That was from me. I've been tracking him for months." Victoria's world tilted. The strange phone calls. The aggressive reaction to postponing the wedding. The way he'd insisted she combine their accounts after the ceremony. "Show me," she whispered. "Don't you dare," Alexander snarled, and in that moment, his mask slipped completely. The sophisticated, gentle man she thought she knew vanished, replaced by someone she didn't recognize at all. His fingers dug into her wrists hard enough to bruise. "What would you do if you discovered the person you loved was living a lie? Share your thoughts below." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Victoria's father stood up, his face darkening with rage. "Take your hands off my daughter." "The police are on their way," James announced, still moving forward. "They have the evidence now. It's over." Alexander's eyes darted around like a trapped animal's. Then, with shocking speed, he released Victoria's hands and shoved her aside. She stumbled, her wedding dress tangling around her legs as she fell against the altar steps. Chaos erupted. Alexander vaulted over the altar rail, heading for the side door. James rushed to help Victoria up while her father and several guests pursued the fleeing groom. Screams and shouts filled the cathedral as the truth of what was happening sank in. Victoria sat on the steps, her perfect updo falling around her face, the warning message now making horrible sense. She watched as her fairy tale crumbled, as the man she thought she knew revealed himself to be a nightmare in prince's clothing. "Are you all right?" James knelt beside her, his face etched with concern. He looked different up close, younger than she'd first thought, with kind eyes and worry lines that spoke of sleepless nights spent pursuing justice. "How did you find out?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. "I was the detective assigned to investigate the disappearance of his second wife," James explained, sitting beside her on the steps. "I never stopped looking. When I saw your engagement announcement in the paper." He trailed off, running a hand through his already messy hair. "I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't let him hurt anyone else." The sound of sirens grew closer. Victoria looked down at her engagement ring, the ring that had seemed like a promise but was really just another prop in an elaborate con. With trembling fingers, she pulled it off and let it fall to the marble floor with a hollow ping. "Thank you," she said, meeting James's gaze, "for not holding your peace." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of police statements, tearful family conversations, and headlines that made Victoria want to disappear. She sat in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of her would-be wedding, a garment bag containing her now tainted dress, boxes of unopened gifts, and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing with concerned messages from guests and reporters alike. "Sweetheart." Her mother's voice came through the door. "Detective Morrison is here again. He needs to ask a few more questions." Victoria pressed her palms against her eyes. "I've already told them everything. He says it's important." She sighed, running her fingers through her hair, now stripped of its elaborate wedding styling. "Fine. Give me a minute." In the living room, James Morrison stood examining the family photos on the mantel, his detective's notepad in hand. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression made her pause. "Ms. Chen," he started. "Victoria," she corrected automatically. "I think we're past formalities after you crashed my wedding." A ghost of a smile crossed his face before returning to seriousness. "Victoria, we found something in Alexander's, or whatever his real name is, private office. Documents with your signature on them." She frowned. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." "They're forgeries," James confirmed, "but very good ones. He was planning to drain your accounts the day after the wedding. He had everything set up, offshore transfers, fake investment portfolios, the works." Victoria sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly weak. "I don't want to hear this. I know it's difficult, but difficult." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "My entire life has become a Lifetime movie. The man I thought I loved is apparently a serial con artist who targeted me for my money. 300 people watched my wedding implode. The local news is calling me the bride who almost was. So no, Detective Morrison, difficult doesn't begin to cover it. Have you ever had your trust betrayed so completely that it made you question everything? Tell us your story below." James sat in the armchair across from her, his expression softening. "You're right. I'm sorry. But we need your help to make sure he doesn't do this to anyone else." "He's still out there, isn't he?" Victoria asked, though she already knew the answer. Alexander had escaped through the church's side entrance, disappearing into the city before the police arrived. "For now. But we're close. The evidence from his office, your testimony, it's all building a case. We just need." "Need what?" James hesitated. "We need you to be visible. Do interviews. Share your story. He's probably already setting up his next identity, looking for his next target. If your face is out there, warning others." "No." Victoria stood abruptly. "Absolutely not. I won't be your bait. That's not what I dash. I was humiliated enough on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I won't parade my shame on national television." "It's not shame," James insisted, standing too. "You're a victim of a sophisticated criminal. No one blames you." Victoria whirled on him. "Really? Because my sister sent me 3 articles today about red flags in relationships with a subject line for future reference. My father's business partners are whispering about his daughter's poor judgment. And my mother can't look at me without crying about the wasted money and ruined reputation." She was shouting now, months of emotions finally breaking free. "I'm a corporate lawyer. I negotiate million-dollar deals. I graduated top of my class at Yale. I'm supposed to be smarter than this." James took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. "The women before you, they were all intelligent, successful professionals too. That's his type. He preys on strong women because the shame of being fooled keeps them quiet afterward." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm summer air drifting through the windows. Maybe they had the right idea. Maybe staying quiet is better than admitting how completely I failed at seeing what was right in front of me. "Is that really what you want?" James asked quietly. "To let him win? To let him keep hurting people because we're all too proud to admit we're human and sometimes humans trust the wrong people?" Victoria turned to the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The same colors she'd chosen for her wedding flowers. Everything still reminded her of that day, of him, of her own blind trust. "I need time," she finally said. I can't be your crusader right now. I need to process this on my own terms." James nodded, gathering his things. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. Not many people could stand up and walk away at the altar, even with proof staring them in the face. Some of his other victims, they ignored the warnings. You didn't. Victoria didn't turn around, but she heard him place something on the side table. That's my card. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, call me. Until then, we'll keep looking for him. I promise you that. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Victoria alone with her thoughts and the fading light of another day in her new, uncertain reality. 3 weeks later, Victoria stood in the elevator of her law firm, steeling herself for her first day back at work. She'd chosen her armor carefully, a crisp navy suit, pearl earrings, and enough concealer to hide the shadows under her eyes. The gossip would be inevitable, but she refused to look like a victim. The elevator stopped at the 14th floor. As the doors opened, a familiar figure rushed in, nearly colliding with her. Detective Morrison. James looked as surprised as she felt, his arms full of files and a coffee cup precariously balanced on top. Victoria. I didn't expect to see you here. I work here, she said flatly. What's your excuse? Before he could answer, the elevator lurched violently. The lights flickered, and the car ground to a shuddering halt between floors. James's coffee cup toppled, splashing across the floor and Victoria's pristine heels. Perfect, she muttered, pressing the emergency button. Just perfect. A crackly voice came through the speaker. We're aware of the situation. Maintenance is on their way, but it might take about an hour. Please remain calm. Victoria slid down the wall to sit on the floor, careful to avoid the coffee puddle. You still haven't answered my question. Why are you here? James set his files down and loosened his tie. Your firm is handling the asset recovery for Alexander's previous victims. I'm here to meet with Patricia Goldman in corporate fraud. That's my department, Victoria said, realization dawning. That's my case. Not anymore, surely. I'm the best fraud attorney in the firm. Personal involvement doesn't change that. James studied her for a moment. You're going to work your own fraud case. Why not? I have unique insight into how he operates, don't I? Her laugh was hollow. Besides, I need something to focus on besides well-meaning relatives sending me self-help books and meditation apps. Silence settled between them, broken only by the hum of the stalled elevator. Victoria pulled out her phone. No signal. How are you really doing? James finally asked, his voice gentle. I'm fine. You don't have to be, you know. Victoria looked up at him sharply. What do you want me to say? That I wake up every night wondering if any of it was real? That I keep replaying every conversation, every touch, every promise, trying to spot the lies? That I'm angry at him, at myself, at you. At me. Yes, at you. You couldn't have figured it out a week earlier? A month? Before I fell. She stopped, swallowing hard. James sat down across from her, their knees almost touching in the confined space. Before you fell in love with him. Was it even him I loved? Victoria whispered. Or just the person he pretended to be? I ask myself the same question about his second wife, James admitted. Lauren. I knew her, before him. We worked together on a few cases when I was still on the force. She was brilliant, intuitive. After she disappeared, I couldn't understand how someone so sharp could fall for his act. Victoria studied his face, seeing the weight of that failure in his eyes. That's why you kept investigating, even after you left the force. He nodded. I promised her family I'd find the truth. When I saw your engagement announcement, your smile in that photo was just like Lauren's. Have you ever met someone who changed the course of your life in an unexpected way? Share your story in the comments. I found something yesterday, Victoria said after a moment. Going through old photos on my phone. There's one where he didn't know I was taking it. His looking at his phone, and his expression, it's like a different person. Cold. Calculating. I think that was the real him, just for a second. Keep the photo, James advised. For the days when you start doubting your decision to walk away. Victoria pulled her knees to her chest. I've been getting messages. Women who were almost his victims. Apparently, he approached them, but something scared him off. They all say the same thing. That he was perfect until he wasn't. That they saw glimpses of something wrong but convinced themselves they were being paranoid. "That's why we need your story out there," James said softly. "You're not just another victim, Victoria. You're the one who got away. The one who stood up at the altar and chose truth over comfort. Even if the truth hurts. Especially then." The elevator creaked, and the lights flickered again. Victoria found herself studying James in the unsteady light, the compassion in his eyes, the determined set of his jaw, the way he dedicated years to protecting women he'd never met from a monster he couldn't forget. "The case files," she said suddenly. "Show them to me." "Here? Now? We're stuck anyway. And if I'm going to help these women get their lives back, I need to know everything." James hesitated, then reached for his files. "Some of this is difficult to read." "I know," Victoria said, straightening her shoulders. "But I'm done hiding from difficult things." As James spread the files between them on the elevator floor, Victoria felt something shift inside her. The shame and anger were still there, but alongside them now was something else: purpose. Maybe she couldn't undo what Alexander had done, but she could help make sure he never did it again. And maybe, just maybe, she could find pieces of herself in the process. The sun had long since set when Victoria found herself in her office, surrounded by case files and empty coffee cups. The city lights twinkled beyond her window, but her attention was fixed on the photograph in her hands, a wedding picture from 2019. Lauren Morrison, James's former colleague, beamed at the camera in white lace, her arm linked with Alexander's. Except then, he'd been Christopher Walsh. A knock at her door made her jump. James stood there, his sleeves rolled up, looking as exhausted as she felt. "Found something," he said, placing a worn leather journal on her desk. It was in the evidence box from Lauren's apartment. "I've read it a dozen times, but maybe you'll see something I missed." Victoria opened the journal carefully. Lauren's handwriting filled the pages, elegant at first, then increasingly frantic as the entries progressed. "March 15, 2019, Victoria read aloud. "Chris was different today. I found him in the study at 3 a.m., talking on the phone in what sounded like Russian. When I asked about it at breakfast, he said I must have been dreaming. But I wasn't dreaming. I heard him say something about transfer protocols and offshore accounts." She looked up at James. This was 2 months after their wedding. "Keep reading." Victoria turned the page. April 2nd, the housekeeper found a passport in the laundry. Different name, Chris's photo. "When I confronted him, he got angry. Really angry. Said I was spying on him. His eyes. I didn't recognize him." Her hands trembled slightly. "This could have been my diary. The mood swings, the secret calls, the way he'd twist things to make you doubt yourself." James pulled up a chair beside her desk. "Lauren was investigating him. She didn't tell me, probably thought I'd try to stop her. But she was building a case." "What happened to her?" "May 3rd, 2019. She called me, left a voicemail. Said she'd found something big, needed to meet. By the time I got the message..." He rubbed his face wearily. "The house was empty. Lauren, the money, everything, gone. Chris Walsh vanished too." Victoria flipped to the last entry. The writing was shaky, urgent. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. The man I married isn't real." The accent slips sometimes when he's angry. The Russian isn't his only language. There are others, women's voices, calling late at night. "He thinks I'm sleeping but I hear them crying. Something about children? I found receipts for..." The entry ended abruptly. "Children." Victoria's blood ran cold. "James, what aren't you telling me?" He was quiet for a long moment. We think is not just stealing money. The pattern suggests he's part of something bigger. A trafficking network maybe. The marriages, the cons, they could be a cover for moving money for the organization." Victoria felt sick. She thought of Alexander's insistence on a quick wedding, his mysterious business trips, the way he'd sometimes take calls in the bathroom with the shower running. "Oh God," she whispered. The destination wedding he wanted. In Thailand. He was so adamant about it, got so angry when I insisted on getting married here instead. "You may have saved more than just yourself by saying no," James said quietly. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing the office. All those women who contacted me, the almost victims, we need to talk to them. Cross-reference their stories, look for patterns. Maybe they saw something, heard something without realizing its importance. Victoria. James's voice was gentle. This isn't your fight. She spun to face him. Like hell it isn't. You said it yourself. I'm the one who got away. The only one who can testify about who he is now, what he looks like, how he operates. Lauren tried to stop him alone, and look what happened. Exactly. Look what happened. James stood too, his composure cracking. I can't let another woman. He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. The air between them suddenly felt charged. Victoria took a step closer. Another woman, you what? Before he could answer, her computer chimed. A new email. From an anonymous account. The subject line made her heart stop. Missing something, darling. With trembling fingers, she clicked it open. A video attachment played automatically. It showed her bedroom, her current bedroom, in her parents' house. The camera panned across her dresser, lingering on framed photos, jewelry, intimate items. It had been filmed recently. Today's newspaper lay on the bed. The final frame showed a handwritten note, "Miss me." "He's been in my room," Victoria whispered. "He's been in my house." James was already on his phone, calling in backup. But Victoria barely heard him. Her eyes were fixed on something in the video, something that made her blood run cold. In the corner of her dresser mirror, reflected for just a split second, was a face she recognized. Not Alexander's. But she'd seen it before. "James," she interrupted his call. "The bartender. From my engagement party. He's in the video. He was working with Alexander the whole time." James ended his call, staring at the frozen frame. "Are you sure?" Victoria nodded, her mind racing. He was there at the wedding too. Not as a bartender, a guest. I remember thinking it was strange, but... "We need to get you somewhere safe," James said, already gathering their things. "Now." As they hurried through the darkened office, Victoria clutched Lauren's journal to her chest. The past and present were colliding, and she had a terrible feeling that Alexander's endgame was just beginning. The safe house was a modest apartment in a quiet suburb, nothing like the luxury condos Alexander had always favored. Victoria sat curled on a worn leather couch, wrapped in a borrowed NYPD sweatshirt that smelled faintly of James's cologne. It was 3 a.m., and sleep felt like a distant memory. James returned from his security check, 2 mugs of tea in hand. Perimeters clear. 2 plainclothes officers outside, surveillance on all approaches. "It feels strange," Victoria said, accepting the tea. "Being afraid of my own home." "We'll have a team sweep your parents' house tomorrow. They're safe at your sister's place for now." Victoria nodded, then surprised herself with a small laugh. "What?" "I just realized. This is the first time we've actually sat down and had a drink together. Although I'm pretty sure this isn't what Alexander meant when he invited you to our wedding." James smiled, settling into an armchair. "Probably not. Though I did bring a gift. The manila folder of evidence doesn't count. Saved you from a lifetime of misery. Better than a toaster." Their laughter faded into comfortable silence. Victoria studied James over the rim of her mug. The tough detective facade had softened in the late hour, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. "Tell me about Lauren," she said softly. "Not the case. Tell me about her as a person." James stared into his tea for a long moment. She loved crossword puzzles. Did them in pen, showed off about it. Had this ridiculous lucky pen with a fuzzy pom-pom on top. He smiled at the memory. "She's the one who taught me to really look at cases, not just see them. Said every crime tells a story if you listen closely enough. You were in love with her." It wasn't a question, but James answered anyway. "We dated briefly, before she met him. It didn't work out, wrong timing, too focused on our careers. But we stayed friends. When she started dating Alexander, whatever his name is, I was happy for her. Thought she'd found someone who could give her the life she deserved." "It's not your fault," Victoria said gently. "What happened to her?" "Isn't it? I was a detective. I should have seen through him." "Like I should have?" "James, he fooled everyone. That's what monsters do, they wear beautiful masks. James met her eyes. How do you do that? Do what? Stay so strong. After everything. Victoria set down her mug. I'm not strong. I'm terrified. But I'm also angry. He didn't just steal my trust or my almost marriage. He stole my ability to believe in love. To believe in myself. And I want that back. You'll get it back, James said with quiet conviction. You're already fighting for it. Something shifted in the air between them. Victoria became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how the soft lamplight caught the warmth in his eyes. When you burst into the church, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, part of me was relieved. Not just because you saved me from him, but because it meant someone cared enough to fight for the truth. To fight for me. James leaned forward, his expression intense. Victoria, I. A sharp crash from outside cut him off. They both jumped to their feet. Stay here, James ordered, drawing his gun. He moved silently to the window, peering through the blinds. Victoria's heart pounded. The officers outside. Not responding to radio. James pulled out his phone, quickly typing a message. Backup's 4 minutes out. Another crash, closer this time. Victoria grabbed Lauren's journal from her bag. We need to go. Now. James nodded, taking her arm. They moved quietly toward the back door, but before they reached it, footsteps thundered up the fire escape. This way, James whispered, pulling her toward the bedroom. He pushed open the window overlooking the adjacent building's roof. We can cross to the next stairwell. Victoria kicked off her heels, heart racing as she climbed onto the windowsill. The gap between buildings wasn't huge, but in the dark, it looked endless. I've got you, James promised, his hand steady on her back. Just don't look down. She took a deep breath, thinking of Lauren's last journal entry, of Alexander's smirking video message, of all the women who had trusted him and paid the price. No more running, she said suddenly, stepping back from the window. Victoria, what? He wants me afraid. Wants me hiding. That's how he keeps control. She straightened her shoulders. I won't give him that power. Heavy footsteps approached the apartment door. We don't have time to, James started. Trust me, Victoria whispered, squeezing his hand. Like I trust you. Their eyes met in the darkness, and something unspoken passed between them. James nodded slowly, positioning himself beside the door. Victoria moved to the center of the room, heart pounding but voice steady as she called out. Come on in, Alexander. Let's finish what we started at the altar. The door burst open with a splintering crack. Alexander stood in the doorway, but he wasn't the polished man from their wedding day. His eyes were wild, his expensive suit rumpled. Behind him, the bartender from the engagement party held a gun. Darling, Alexander drawled, his accent slipping into something harder, more Eastern European. Did you really think a little detective work would be enough to stop me? Victoria forced herself to meet his gaze. Did you really think I'd be stupid enough to come here without a plan? His smile turned cruel. Always the clever one. That's what I liked about you, Victoria. Such a sharp mind. He stepped closer. It will be a shame to waste it. Like you wasted Lauren's. The name hit him like a physical blow. For a split second, his mask slipped completely, revealing something inhuman underneath. Anton, he snapped at the bartender. Find Morrison. The bartender moved toward the bedroom, but Alexander held up his hand. Actually, let him watch. He should see what happens when he interferes with my work. James emerged from the shadows, gun trained on Alexander. It's over. Backup's already here. Alexander laughed. You mean the two officers outside? They're taking a little nap. As for backup. He pulled out his phone, showing a scanner app. Police bands are quiet. Someone must have intercepted your call. Victoria's blood ran cold. How deep did his organization go? Now, Alexander continued, where's Lauren's journal? Safe, Victoria said. Along with copies of everything else we found. One click and it all goes public. Liar. Alexander moved with shocking speed, grabbing her throat. You always were a terrible liar, Victoria. Your left eye twitches. James stepped forward, but Anton swung his gun around. Stay back, detective. The journal, Alexander squeezed harder. Now. Victoria clawed at his hand, gasping. In his rage, he'd made a mistake. He was too focused on her face to notice her other hand sliding into her sweatshirt pocket. You want to know what happened to Lauren? She choked out. Check your email. Alexander's grip loosened slightly. What? Now, James. Several things happened at once. Victoria drove her knee up, catching Alexander in the groin. As he doubled over, she pulled the taser from her pocket, the one James had given her earlier, and pressed it into his side. Alexander convulsed, howling. James tackled Anton, sending the gun skittering across the floor. The two men grappled, trading brutal punches. Victoria scrambled for the gun, but Alexander recovered faster than she expected. His hand clamped around her ankle, dragging her back. You bitch, he snarled, all pretense of sophistication gone. You think you can humiliate me? Destroy everything I've built. He slammed her head against the floor. Stars exploded behind her eyes. I own you, he hissed. I own all of you. Your pathetic detective couldn't save Lauren, and he can't save you. Through blurring vision, Victoria saw James struggling with Anton near the window. A gun went off, glass shattered, someone screamed. No. Victoria thrashed against Alexander's grip. James. Alexander laughed darkly. See? Everyone who tries to help you dies. Just like Lauren. Just like. His words cut off in a gurgle. Victoria had driven her elbow back, catching him in the throat. She rolled away, grabbing the fallen taser. But Alexander was done playing. He pulled a knife from his jacket, lunging at her with murderous rage. I should have done this at the altar, he spat. Victoria scrambled backward, her shoulders hitting the wall. The taser sparked weakly, its charge depleted. Alexander raised the knife. A single gunshot rang out. Alexander froze, a look of surprise crossing his face. A red stain bloomed on his chest. He turned slowly. James stood in the doorway, gun steady despite the blood running down his arm. Anton lay unconscious by the broken window. That's for Lauren, James said quietly. Alexander took a stumbling step forward, then collapsed. Victoria couldn't move. Her whole body shook as the adrenaline crashed. In the distance, sirens finally wailed. Victoria. James rushed to her, his good arm pulling her close. God, Victoria, I'm so sorry. I should have. She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. Don't. Please don't blame yourself. Not again. When I saw him hurt you. James's voice broke. I thought. I couldn't lose someone else I love. Not to him. Not again. Victoria pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. What did you say? Before he could answer, heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Police officers flooded the room, followed by FBI agents. Detective Morrison, a stern-faced agent, called out. Step away from Ms. Chen. We need to debrief you both separately. James hesitated, his arm still around Victoria. It's okay, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere. But as the agents led them apart, Victoria felt something inside her shatter. Not from fear or pain, but from the weight of everything unsaid. The love she'd thought she'd found with Alexander had been a beautiful lie. And now, when something real was finally within reach, she looked back at James, seeing her own heartbreak mirrored in his eyes. They had survived Alexander's revenge, but at what cost? And could they find their way back to that moment of truth, or would duty and trauma and guilt keep them forever apart? 2 weeks later, Victoria stood in front of the FBI building, Lauren's journal clutched to her chest. The debriefings were finally over. Alexander, whose real name turned out to be Dmitry Volkov, was in custody, along with a significant portion of his trafficking network. The evidence she and James had gathered had helped expose corruption in 3 police departments and 2 federal offices. But she hadn't seen James since that night. Ms. Chen. Agent Roberts approached, holding out a manila envelope. The last of your personal effects from evidence. You're free to go. Victoria took the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. Any word on Detective Morrison's suspension? That's confidential information. Please, she whispered. I need to know he's okay. The agent's stern expression softened slightly. The review board cleared him yesterday. Justified use of force. But what? He resigned this morning. Turned in his badge, cleaned out his desk. Said something about needing to make things right. Victoria's heart clenched. She knew that guilt, that need to atone for perceived failures. She'd seen it in his eyes every time he talked about Lauren. Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone and loving them? Share your thoughts below. The taxi ride to James's apartment felt endless. She'd rehearsed what to say 1,000 times, but when she finally stood at his door, the words evaporated. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. Harder. James, I know you're in there. Your neighbor said you haven't left in days. Silence. Fine, she called through the door. Then just listen. You're doing exactly what Alexander wanted, letting him destroy another relationship. He didn't just steal money and lives, he stole people's ability to trust, to love. And I refuse to let him win again. She pressed her forehead against the cool wood. I spent 6 months with a man who pretended to love me. But you crashed my wedding to save me. You stayed up nights building a case. You took a bullet protecting me. That's real love, James. And it terrifies you because the last time you loved someone, Alexander took her away. The door opened so suddenly she nearly fell forward. James caught her arms, steadying her. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes haunted. You shouldn't be here, he said roughly. Too bad. She pushed past him into the apartment. Case files and whiskey bottles littered every surface. You don't get to decide that for me. Victoria. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I'm no good for you. Everything I touch in this case turns to ash. Lauren, the other victims, even you all got hurt because I wasn't fast enough, smart enough. Stop. Victoria grabbed his hands. Lauren's last journal entry. Want to know what it really said? She pulled out the worn book, opening to the final page. If anything happens to me, it wasn't James's fault. He sees the best in people, believes in justice. Dimitri will use that against him. But James's heart, his goodness, that's what makes him special. Don't let him forget that. James stared at the words, written in Lauren's elegant hand. When did you? I found it during the evidence review. She wrote it for you, James. She knew you'd blame yourself. I failed her, he whispered. No. You honored her. You kept fighting, kept protecting others. And now. Victoria touched his cheek gently. Now you have a choice. You can let Alexander win by running away from love again. Or you can choose to believe in something real. James leaned into her touch, his eyes closing. I can't lose you too. You won't. But you have to trust me enough to try. He opened his eyes, and Victoria saw the war raging behind them. Fear versus hope. Guilt versus love. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to love someone without trying to solve them like a case, without seeing danger in every shadow. Victoria smiled softly. Maybe that's exactly what I need. Someone who looks closer, who sees the whole story. And maybe you need someone who refuses to let you hide from your own heart. James's hands trembled as they framed her face. The night Alexander attacked. I wanted to tell you. Tell me now. He took a shaking breath. I love you. Not because you remind me of Lauren, or because of the case. I love you because you're brave and brilliant and stubborn as hell. Because you choose truth over comfort, justice over safety. Because you make me believe in second chances. Victoria's heart soared. Then take one. Take a second chance with me. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then James pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home. It wasn't the polished passion of Alexander's kisses. It was real and raw and a little desperate, full of healing and hope and possibility. When they finally parted, Victoria saw something new in James's eyes. Peace. So, she whispered against his lips, about that resignation letter. He laughed softly. Already shredded it. My captain called. Said something about a new task force, specializing in trafficking and fraud cases. Said they need someone who knows how these monsters think. They need you, Victoria agreed. We all do. James brushed away the tears she hadn't realized were falling. What about you? Ready to go back to corporate law? She shook her head. I'm joining the DA's office. Special Victims Unit. Turns out I'm pretty good at spotting liars now. His smile was like sunrise after a long night. Partners, then. Partners, she agreed. In every way. 1 year later. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, their cameras flashing as Victoria emerged into the sunlight. Behind her, the heavy doors closed on Alexander's fate, guilty on all counts, with a sentence that ensured he would never hurt another woman again. Ms. Chen. The reporters surged forward. How does it feel to be the one who finally brought down the wedding predator? Victoria adjusted her grip on her briefcase, where Lauren's journal still traveled with her to every case. This victory belongs to many people. To the brave women who came forward. To the dedicated law enforcement officers who never stopped searching for the truth. And especially to Lauren Morrison, whose final act of courage helped us expose this trafficking network. And your personal relationship with Detective Morrison? Any comment on how that affected the case? A warm hand settled on her lower back. James appeared beside her, looking sharp in his court suit. The DA's office and the trafficking task force worked together professionally to achieve justice. That's all that matters today. Victoria hid a smile. They'd kept their relationship quiet during the trial, not wanting to give Alexander's defense team any ammunition. But now, she reached for James's hand, intertwining their fingers. The reporters' cameras went wild. Actually, she said clearly, I'd like to say something about that. When I almost married Alexander, I thought I knew what love was. I thought it was grand gestures and fairy tale promises. But real love? It's showing up. It's fighting for truth even when it hurts. It's believing in someone enough to let them be strong on their own. James squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with pride and something deeper. What does true love mean to you? Share your story in the comments below. Later that evening, they stood in their favorite spot, the roof garden of their new apartment. The city sparkled below, and a bottle of champagne chilled nearby. Lauren would be proud, Victoria said softly, running her fingers over the journal's worn cover. The task force has rescued 15 women in the past year alone. James wrapped his arms around her from behind. She would be proud of you. Taking on the DA's role, facing Alexander in court, you were incredible. Victoria leaned back against his chest. You know what today is. 1 year since that night in the safe house. When you first said you loved me. James pressed a kiss to her neck. Best confession I ever made. Victoria turned in his arms. I have one of my own to make. Oh. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small evidence bag. Inside was a familiar piece of paper. James's eyes widened. Is that the warning text you sent me? The one that stopped my wedding? I had the tech team print it today, after the trial. She opened the bag carefully. I thought we could frame it. Put it next to Lauren's journal in the study. James was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the words on the paper. You know, I almost didn't send it. I was so afraid of being wrong, of causing pain for no reason. But you chose truth over comfort, Victoria said softly. Just like you taught me to do. He cupped her face in his hands. You taught me something too. About letting love be stronger than fear. Victoria smiled, reaching up to straighten his tie, a gesture that had become their private symbol of trust and partnership. Speaking of which, I have another confession. Should I be worried? Remember that witness protection case we worked last month? The one with the couple who needed new identities. James nodded slowly. Well, I might have borrowed some of their paperwork. The marriage license forms. His breath caught. Victoria. She pulled the documents from her briefcase. I already filled out our parts. All it needs is your signature, if you want. James stared at the papers, then back at her. Are you proposing to me with fraudulent government documents? Technically, they're legitimate documents. Just creatively acquired. Her voice softened. I know it's not traditional. But neither are we. And I don't want traditional. I want real. James laughed, the sound full of joy and love. God, I adore you. He pulled her close. But we're not using stolen forms. Victoria's heart stuttered. Oh, I just thought. He reached into his suit jacket, pulling out a small box. Because I already got these. Inside were 2 simple platinum bands. And beneath them, a properly filed marriage license application. Great minds, he whispered against her lips. Victoria felt tears spill down her cheeks. How long have you been carrying those? Since the day you chose to stay and fight instead of running. Since you showed me that love isn't about protecting someone from pain, it's about facing it together. She took his face in her hands. James Morrison, are you proposing to me with legitimate government documents? His smile was radiant. Victoria Chen, will you marry me? Legally, properly, and with absolutely no international crime syndicates involved. Yes, she laughed through her tears. But I get to keep the stolen forms as a souvenir. He kissed her then, deep and true, as the city twinkled below and their future stretched out before them. Not a fairy tale, but something better. Something real. Later, as they lay tangled together watching the sunrise, Victoria thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, standing in her wedding dress, about to make the biggest mistake of her life. That woman had thought she needed to be saved. But the truth was, love, real love, didn't save you. It gave you the strength to save yourself. And then it stood beside you while you built something beautiful from the ashes of what broke you. She looked at James, sleeping peacefully for the first time since she'd known him. The ghosts of his past had finally quieted. Lauren's journal lay on the bedside table, its final pages now filled with new stories of justice and redemption. Sometimes, Victoria realized, the happy ending isn't the one you planned. Sometimes it's the one that finds you when you're brave enough to choose truth over fairy tales, healing over hiding, and love over fear.